Good evening. This is the March 26th meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, chair of the CAC. Our vice chair is Naj Daniels. I'd like to thank our clerk, Amy Sayung, and our operator, Daniela Reblay, for this meeting. Madam Clerk, can you please do a roll call to ensure we have quorum and then read an announcement about public comment?
Thank you. CAC members, when I call your name, please say present to ensure quorum. Member Bars? Bars absent. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels present.
Daniels present. Member Ford?
Ford present.
Ford present. Member Kim?
Kim present.
Kim present. Member Levine?
Levine present.
Levine present. Member Margarita? Margarita absent. Member Milford Rosales? Milford Rosales absent. Member Ng?
Present.
Ng present. Member Ortega?
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Chair Siegel?
Siegel present.
Siegel present. Chair, we have quorum. Also, public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you are allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you so much. So we'll move on to item 2, which is the chair's report. Thank you to Amy Sayung for sharing the executive director's report from yesterday's Transportation Authority board meeting. The report is also posted on the agency website at sfcta.org/events. There was a report out by several board members and staff on a recent study tour to learn from New York City about their congestion relief zone, which has been in operation since January 5th. The results to date show traffic congestion is down, commute times by private vehicles and buses are shorter, and transit ridership and foot traffic are up. I'll note that the U.S. Department of Transportation has sought to end the program and set a recently extended deadline in late April. Meanwhile, New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority has a lawsuit pending. In the meantime, there is a short slide deck posted on the SFCTA website about the trip, and more information is available at mta.info/project/CBDTP. Moving back to the Bay Area, yesterday amendments to Senate Bill 63, the Connect Bay Area Act, were published, adding the first set of substantive language to the bill, which is intended to authorize a regional transportation revenue measure that could be placed on the November 2026 ballot, either by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission or via a citizens initiative to help stabilize and improve Bay Area transit, focusing on AC Transit, BART, Caltrain, and Muni. I appreciate having staff from BART and Caltrain here tonight to provide an update on their financial outlooks and actions to grow ridership, cut costs, and improve efficiency. And we also have SFCTA staff available to walk us through SB 63. Staff anticipates agendizing SFMTA to return to the CAC in May to provide updates on the Muni funding working group and the SFMTA's efforts to address their project deficits, looking toward the regional measure, but also local revenue and non-revenue strategies. Last announcement before meeting management is a big CAC welcome to our newest CAC member representing District 11, Zamil Imaduddin. Zamil, would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is Zamil Imaduddin. I'm the newest member. I'm super excited to serve alongside everyone. I'm probably in process of some papers, so I will not be speaking today, but I'll definitely be typing away. Nice to meet you all.
Welcome, Zamil. And then I'll go through some meeting management notes since we have a new member. CAC members, if you would like to speak, you can indicate so by placing your name card on its end like this so that it's pointing up. When I call on you to speak, please press the red star sticker on the base of the microphone to turn it on. A red light below the mouthpiece indicates that the microphone is on. Kindly turn off the microphone when done speaking by pressing the red star again. CAC members, please be sure to speak directly into the microphone so that folks in the back of the room can hear you. Please try to limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Seeing any, is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
There is no remote public comment on the chair's report.
Great, thank you so much. Then we can move on to the consent agenda. Items 3 and 4 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present, but is available to answer questions. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Member Levine?
Thank you. Last week or two, I've been thinking a little bit about the issue that Member Margarita raised regarding this new signal at Monterey Boulevard, and the response was that the signal would be expensive and a long time in coming. And I was wondering, I know they indicated that they were doing a number of potential things, upgrading sidewalk striping, pedestrian safety zones, et cetera. It just seemed to me that I wonder whether simple speed bumps after the off-ramp might be a way to deal with it, with a sign as drivers come off the off-ramp, with a sign saying basically beware, or a warning that there will be speed bumps ahead. It seems that would be a simple, inexpensive, and fairly quick turnaround to install something like that. Anyway, I just it came to mind, and it wasn't anything that as far as I can remember, was considered and might be considered as an alternative. Thank you.
Member Bars?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member Levine. I also shared that concern. I think I just wanted to report back that I met with Paul Stannis from SFCTA after that meeting about Monterey Boulevard. We actually met this morning, in fact. And so they are willing to look at other interventions, essentially, to address the high volume and high speeds along Monterey Boulevard. I don't know if that means speed bumps, but they're willing to consider it. What they brought to us last meeting was really just about applying the quick build toolkit to Monterey Boulevard, which I do think is a good idea. But I'm happy to say that they're willing to look into it further, and actually I'm planning to go and take some video recordings of some of the traffic or some of the vehicular behavior that we see regularly on Monterey Boulevard. Yeah.
Do any other members have questions or comments on the, Member Margarita?
Thank you. I don't have questions or comments. I just wanted to apologize, 1, for running late, and 2, just remind the board that I am going to have to leave early today, so my apologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? We can go to public comment in the room if there is any. Seeing any, is there any remote public comment on the consent agenda?
There is no remote public comment for the consent agenda.
May I have a motion and a second to approve items 3 and 4 on the consent agenda? Moved by Member Bars, seconded by Member Margarita. Madam Clerk, can you please take a roll call vote?
Yes, just a gentle reminder to please pull the mic as close as possible. We'd really appreciate it. On the motion to approve item 3 and item 4 on the consent agenda, Member Bars?
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Vice Chair Daniels?
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Ford?
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim?
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine? Levine, aye. Member Margarita? Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales? Milford Rosales, absent. Member Ng? Ng, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 9 ayes. The consent agenda is approved.
Great, that puts us on item 5, adopt a motion of support to approve programming priorities for up to $4.5 million in San Francisco's estimated fiscal year 2025-2026 State Transit Assistance County Block Grant Funds. This is an action item. And Mike Pickford, Principal Transportation Planner, is here with us to present this item.
Good evening. Can you guys see my slides? Okay, yeah, I'm not getting the Zoom menu to present, so I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, just a minute. Okay, there we go. It was minimized. Okay. There we go. Thank you for bearing with. Right, so in 2018, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission established the State Transit Assistance County Block Grant Program to be administered by congestion management agencies, including the Transportation Authority here in San Francisco. These funds were previously distributed via a regional paratransit program and regional lifeline transportation program that focused on the transportation needs of low-income populations. STA funds are one of the few programs that we prioritize that can direct funds to operating programs as well as capital infrastructure. In keeping with the history of this funding source, funding paratransit and other lifeline transportation projects, we've programmed STA funds to each cycle of SFMTA's paratransit program in line with the amount that it would have received under that former regional paratransit program. STA County Block Grant revenues come from a state sales tax on diesel fuel, which is a very volatile funding source, and only transit operators may receive these funds. This year, MTC estimates that we will receive up to about $4.5 million in STA funds. Because final revenues are not yet known, MTC has advised us to program 95% of the expected revenues with consideration for programming up to 100% should revenues meet those full projections. Consistent with past programming cycles, we recommend programming $3.3 million to SFMTA's paratransit program to complement Prop L sales tax funds and support this critical program for seniors and people with disabilities. We also recommend up to about $1.2 million for BART and SFMTA's elevator attendant program, which helps ensure that elevators are safe and available for any rider who needs them. I'll have a little bit more detail about each project. For paratransit, the SFMTA provides paratransit services to persons with disabilities in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. This program also includes the Shop Around and Van Gogh shuttles, as well as ramp taxi incentives and the Essential Trip Card. These programs are critically important for people with disabilities and the elderly who are unable to fully utilize fixed route transit. The recommended funding amount is equal to the amount provided in previous programming cycles and complements the $13+ million programmed for paratransit in the sales tax. The $31.2 million cost that you see is the expected cost of the paratransit contract based on recent usage of the service. In prior years, SFMTA has based the program cost on the maximum possible contract amount, so that's why the cost of the program appears lower this year than last year. Our recommendation is to maintain the same level of STA funding as last year, meaning that the Transportation Authority will effectively be funding a higher proportion of the paratransit costs. This will reduce pressure on SFMTA's operating budget funds, allowing those funds to be available for transit service or other needs. The next project, BART's Elevator Attendant Program, provides attendants to monitor each station at the 4 downtown BART and Muni stations. Attendants help improve safety, mobility, and accessibility for customers who rely on those elevators across the transit system to discourage undesirable behaviors, improve elevator cleanliness and reliability, decrease fare evasion, and reduce maintenance costs. The program also supports the economic recovery of downtown San Francisco and encourages people to take transit. We have funded this program with STA funds since 2019, and above and beyond the STA funds, BART and SFMTA contribute equally to fund the rest of the program costs. The contract for the current attendant provider expires at the end of June, so BART put the contract out to bid last fall. Program costs that you see in your packet and staffing details are therefore estimates provided by BART staff, and the BART board is expected to consider a new contract for the program at its meeting on April 10th, and at that point the costs will be finalized when the new contract is approved. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, and we do have project managers from both agencies.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Do any members have questions or comments on this item? Member Kim?
Chair, thank you for presentation. Yeah, I have a question. The elevator attendant program. My understanding is this attendant stay inside of elevator box in the whole time, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and then I have experience like SF or Chinatown where there's a lot of elevators usage. I never see the elevator attendant, but San Francisco we have some issue like drug addicts and homeless people, but I want to know attendant what kind of authority they can have. Like somebody is misbehaved, and then what's their duty? Just report to the SFPD, or they can react?
First, I just wanted to clarify that this program is just for the 4 downtown shared stations. So that's Embarcadero, Montgomery, Powell, and Civic Center. And then to respond to your question, I'd like to invite Millie Chaudhary from BART to respond about the attendance.
Hi, everyone. Millie Chaudhary, Chiher, Senior Manager of Social Services Partnerships, and I manage the Elevator Attendant Program. Elevator attendants have the ability to de-escalate situations as needed. If there are, any sort of confrontations between patrons, they are skilled and trained to be able to de-escalate situations. If someone is, displaying negative behavior, they are, they're addressing it in the ways that they can using their skills. But of course, if the situation is escalating to a certain point where PD or a station agent needs to be called in, they have the mechanism to do so with the devices that they have on hand, as well as using the on-call button in the elevators. But they do have the training and the skills to be able to address situations and then effectively call in, the necessary services needed.
Thank you for answer. But I'm concerning, it's been there like 2019 or 16, but still we facing a lot of financial deficit. But same thing, even though attendance there, maybe they fail to de-escalate, and then they need some extra help. So but total cost like even 4 million comparing to BART budget is small, but it's still big enough money. Actually, this week, MTA had a meeting to, service, they can save several millions to cutting the service. If we use this money for saving those service, probably more effective and then beneficial, even though this is the existing service. So maybe we can consider really we need this service, probably this attendant cannot solve the problem. So many people see some behavior not cross the line, but they behave weird, even no touch, no physical contact, but people avoid the situation. So probably attendants there, they cannot manage that. And a serious one, anyway, we need help from the BART agent or SFPD. So I'm questioning this attendant program. How can we really remedy the situation or undo the financial crisis?
Yes. So, thank you for that. I do want to clarify that, they do deter a lot of negative activity. We do have data that shows that they are deterring, any sort of drug usage in the elevators, using the elevator for unintended purposes, such as a restroom. So they are preventing, things that we see in other elevators that can cause the elevators to be non-operational and out of service. So the elevators with the attendants do deter a lot of activity to keep the elevators in operation and to be used by patrons who need to use the elevator to move around our system. So we do have data that shows, we collect data from the program right now to, demonstrate, the types of activity that they deter. And of course, yes, when there is an egregious situation, acts of violence, they are not the ones that can respond to those types of situations. They do have to call outside responders. We do have our connection with BART Police Department has our crisis intervention specialists who they have the ability, our elevator attendants have the ability to contact our BART dispatch and ask for crisis intervention specialist assistance to handle any kind of egregious situations. But again, they do deter a lot of the negative activity that brings a lot of elevators otherwise in our systems out of service. And we need the elevators in the downtown stations to be in service as much as possible. They are high traffic stations and serve a lot of SFCTA and BART patrons.
Yeah, thank you for answering.
Member Bars.
Thank you. I had a similar question to my colleague, which is just how do you measure the effectiveness of both of these programs, both paratransit and the BART attendant program? And I'll just say anecdotally, I use the BART elevators a lot. I often take BART with my son, who uses the stroller, so I'm very, very familiar with it. And generally, personally, I've had good experiences. But I'm just curious, programmatically, how are we measuring success with both of these things?
I mean, we should probably start with BART since they're currently at the table, but I did want to point out in the packet there is some information on metrics that BART measures, and I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, yes, I was going to actually refer to that, and also, we're looking at the amount of time that the elevators are in operations, and so, and the amount of maintenance that's required for these elevators versus elevators that do not have attendants. But yes, we are measuring the metrics that are in the information provided.
And then similarly for paratransit, there are statistics included in the packet for performance indicators, including total number of trips, for the paratransit service, as well as some of the sub-programs that I had mentioned.
Maybe I just need you to point it out to me, but I read the paratransit one. I did not read all of the BART one. What I saw in the packet is just a table describing the metrics, not the actual reported metrics, or am I missing it?
For the elevator attendant program,
Yeah.
that is what you'll see. If you scroll a few pages prior to that, there is a table of paratransit performance indicators that does have statistics by fiscal year.
Okay. So I think, okay, so on, let's do paratransit and then elevator. So for paratransit, yes, I saw the ridership statistics. The on-time percentage row was not completed, right? Or, oh no, it is, but it's sorry, it's broken down by mode, I see. Yeah, okay. So they're mostly on time, and we take between 300,000 and then 600,000 trips per year. Is there any other interpretation around that? Like, is there any benchmarking against other paratransit systems?
I would need to refer to SFMTA for that. We should have Jonathan Chang. Looks like he is online. If you would like to hear him.
Yeah, hi. Hi, my name is Jonathan Chang. I'm the I'm the paratransit manager here at SFMTA. So every paratransit program is unique. So we don't necessarily compare ourselves, to like East Bay Paratransit, which runs covers Alameda County as well as Contra Costa and whatnot, or San Mateo, because we all provide paratransit service, but in a different means. We do provide, the traditional van service. But in San Francisco, one thing that is unique to our service is that we also provide a taxi program. So riders can use the taxi program to get on same day on demand trips. We also do a customer satisfaction survey every year. So we go out to the community, we reach out to riders who've taken trips recently, and we ask them about their satisfaction with both the overall program as well as their most recent trip, as well as with the kind of the broker administrative services. And in our last survey, I believe we had over a 90% overall satisfaction rate with both the service as well as the survey trip. And I could provide more information to the members if they want. Thank you.
Got it. Okay. So my takeaway is the riders that paratransit serves are generally pretty happy with it, and we don't compare ourselves to other regions. Thank you.
Mr. Daniels.
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate both of these programs. My question was, are there any conversations or is there a plan to bring the EAP program on board as a permanent function?
I think Pam Herhold from BART will respond.
Hi, good evening. I'm Pamela Herhold, the Assistant General Manager for Performance and Budget. And while we have discussed that previously when we were setting up the program, at this point in time, and we did review it recently, at this point in time, given our financial situation, we believe it's best in the best interest of BART and everybody to continue to work with our nonprofit providers for this type of service, and it might be something to revisit later when our financials are stabilized.
Thank you.
Member Margarita.
Thank you again for the presentation. And I know that the budget looks grim, so my question is probably not going to be popular, but I remember that you had presented before on this topic, and I asked with regards to expanding the program to 16th and 24th Street. And at the time, I think the answer, please correct me if I'm wrong, was more about the busyness of the downtown 4 locations, and that's why this program was focused on those 4 stops. But I still want to emphasize the importance of focusing on the 16th and 24th Street BART stations I think from the last time when this topic came up, a couple of things unfortunately have happened at those stations, and so just to expand on this program for safety concerns and to ensure that all of the riders are feeling supported and safe, right? And to see if there's any other measures that you have looked into to look at 16th and 24th Street. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll just say that, we were strongly considering 16th and 24th Street as we were, putting the service out for bid. At this time, though, with BERT's, fiscal challenges, we do not have the funding to be able to support additional stations, but these are stations that are on our radar and we are strongly considering for the future.
Thank you.
If I may, sorry to be a broken record, the folks online are having trouble hearing a lot of you, so just pull these close and make the mic your best friend so they can hear you.
That reminder. There are no other questions or comments from members. Is there any public comment in the room on this item? Operator, is there any remote public comment on this item?
There is no remote public comment on this item. Thank you.
Great. Public comment on this item is closed. May I have a motion and a second to approve this item?
Move to approve.
Moved by Vice Chair Daniels, seconded by Member Levine. Madam Clerk, would you please take a roll call vote?
Chair, would you like to do same house, same call?
Are we the same group? Yeah. Without objection, we can take the same house, same call. Great. Item 5 is approved. Thank you again so much for the presentation and to the program managers for being here. Let's move on to item 6, adopt a motion of support to adopt the final Prop L strategic plan. This is an action item. And Amelia Wally, Senior Program Analyst, is here with us to present this item.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Amelia Wally, nice to see you all. Thanks for being here. I am very excited to present to you the final Prop L strategic plan for your consideration, which marks the final milestone in standing up Prop L. So for the benefit of folks who have not been following along this year-plus long process, I have 2 quick background slides on the Prop L expenditure plan before we jump into the strategic plan. So, as a reminder, voters approved the Prop L expenditure plan back in November of 2022, and it superseded the previous half-cent sales tax measure, Prop K, in April 2023. In the expenditure plan, there are 5 categories, and across those categories are 28 programs that define the types of investments that are eligible to receive Prop L funds and establish the share of revenues that each program may receive. It also provides guidance on how to administer the sales tax program. It requires adoption of a strategic plan and 5-year prioritization programs. This pie chart shows those 5 categories I just mentioned that voters approved in Prop L. Their percentages show the share of revenues that each category will receive over the life of the measure. And I'll just note at this point here that the voter-approved expenditure plan explicitly limits the use of sales tax revenues to capital projects and disallows using the funding for operations unless specifically called out. So the only ongoing operations funding in the expenditure plan is for paratransit. So switching gears to the strategic plan, there are 3 main elements: policies, revenues, and expenditures. The strategic plan contains the policies for administration of the sales tax program. It establishes revenue projections for the 30-year expenditure plan period, forecasts program administration expenses, and determines how much funds are available for each expenditure plan program on an annual basis, as well as reimbursement schedules and any financing costs associated with advancing sales tax funds in order to accelerate delivery of project benefits to the public. So in summary, the strategic plan reconciles the timing of expected sales tax revenues with the schedule for when project sponsors need those revenues over the 30-year expenditure plan period. It sets policies for administration of the program to ensure prudent stewardship of taxpayer funds, and it provides a solid financial basis for the issuance of debt as needed to accelerate delivery of benefits to the public. And that's all really important. It helps us to support project delivery and leveraging of other federal, state, and regional sources, and for project sponsors to be able to sort of count on Prop L funds being available. And it allows us to ensure that revenues are sufficient to cover expenditures, including any debt needed to advance project delivery. So remember, in addition to the strategic plan, the expenditure plan also requires approval of 5-year prioritization programs, or 5 YPPs, as prerequisites for allocation of funds. And the 5 YPPs are the documents that identify the specific projects that will receive sales tax funds and how much in the next 5-year period for each of the Prop L programs. The strategic plan and the 5 YPPs are developed in tandem, and we update them every 5 years. And we do that in part because it's hard to know what specific project needs look like in 10 or 20 years from now. During these updates, we incorporate actual revenues and expenditures into the strategic plan. We update revenue forecasts and other assumptions as needed. And then we work with project sponsors, the public, and other interested parties to identify the projects to be funded in the next 5-year period. So we started the update process with approval of the strategic plan baseline in June of 2023, and we've updated that as we've developed and adopted the 5 YPPs in the time since. With all the 5 YPPs now adopted by the board, including the amendment to EP6, the Muni Maintenance 5 YPP that the board approved yesterday, we can now bring the final strategic plan, which incorporates all of the programming and reimbursement schedules from the 5 YPPs, along with updates to actual revenues and expenditures. And adoption of this final strategic plan, as I mentioned, marks the end of the first strategic plan and 5 YPP update process for Prop L. And this shows that process. We're in step 3 here. So to finalize the strategic plan, we treat up revenues, expenditures, and financing costs for fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 based on the actuals. We incorporated the amendment to the Muni Maintenance 5 YPP, and we evaluated our assumptions from the strategic plan baseline to see if any warranted updating. The main notable change here is proposed revision to the 30-year revenue forecast to lower it and reduce programming commensurately beginning in year 6. We did not make any changes to policies. So let's get started. We'll start with the revenue forecast. The original revenue estimate for the expenditure plan was developed back in June of 2021. And then when we developed the baseline in spring of 2023, we worked with economic consultants and compared near-term forecasts with the city's controller's office. At that time, we lowered the revenue by about 7% compared to the expenditure plan forecast based on the latest data available. In late 2024, we again worked with economic consultants to update the revenue forecast for the final strategic plan. And the updated revenue forecast reflects a lower projection of $1.95 billion 2020 dollars, which is about 11% lower than the revenue projection in the strategic plan baseline, translates to about $417 million in year of expenditure dollars. This projection is grounded in the latest data. It reflects the actual revenues of the last 2 fiscal years, as well as the current economic picture that continues to show a slow pandemic recovery in San Francisco. We think it's prudent to go ahead and adjust our forecast in the strategic plan in order to make sure that we have enough revenues to meet our commitments to projects and debt. And it should be noted that adoption of this final strategic plan is happening at the start of year 3 of a 30-year plan. So there are recent positive signs of recovery, such as more employees returning to work in San Francisco offices versus remotely. So that provides some cause for optimism that revenues may outperform expectations as reflected in this strategic plan. And with each strategic plan and 5 YPP cycle, we revisit sales tax projections. If they're higher than had previously been assumed, there will be additional funds to program to projects. And we anticipate beginning the next strategic plan and 5 YPP update cycle in early fiscal year 28 or fall of 2027. And so this graph just shows in year of expenditure dollars, the historic actual sales tax revenues and the forecast. The yellow line is what we've got in this final strategic plan. And you can see the light green line is from the baseline. So We are approaching pre-pandemic levels, not quite there yet, but on our way. And so the other side of the coin is the expenditures. So as a reminder, operating and administration costs are netted out first, and they're set at a percentage of revenues. They taper off towards the end of the program. So as was approved in the baseline and as it was in Prop K, we are carrying 7.9% for this cost. And then also, as was approved in the baseline, we're holding the last 1.75 years of revenue in a reserve to further protect against the risk that revenues are lower than projected and helping to ensure we have enough funds to cover obligations. Prop L superseded Prop K, and we carried forward Prop K financial obligations into Prop L. The model assumptions for those obligations have not changed. We continue to pay existing debt from the 2017 bond to the tune of about $21 million a year. Of course, the significant cash flow need for Prop K in the early years does put some pressure on our need for debt. Okay, in this slide, there are a lot of numbers on this slide. It's comparing the elements of revenues and expenditures in the baseline to the final strategic plan. So just point out the highlights, which is that revenues are down and therefore funds used on projects are down, and financing costs go up a little bit. Okay. So since we reduced the revenue forecast, we needed to reduce expenditures as well. And we wanted to approach the reduction of revenues for projects in a thoughtful and fair way. We developed this set of principles to guide our work with sponsors to fit project funding and costs within the lower revenue amount. And so those principles are on the screen, and they are as follows. First, we wanted to keep funding as programmed in the current 5 YPP cycle and protect the first 5 years. We've all worked so hard to approve over the last year and a half or so. Next, we wanted to preserve funding to the extent possible for the Portal and BART Core Capacity Program, which have full funding grant agreements with significant leveraging and federal funds at play. We wanted to sustain paratransit services at the baseline funding level as long as we could for stability of that program. And finally, we wanted to right-size programming across the different program lines by bringing all the programs to a comparable level of programming, project and finance costs, as a percentage of their project funding cap. And now I'll just go through the specifics of the programming changes. For the Portal project, we preserved programming at $300 million with slightly delayed cash flow to support leveraging of a $3 billion federal grant. For BART Core Capacity, we reduced total programming from $90 to $85 million in delayed cash flow, and we have already allocated over $35 million for this project for new trains. And then for Mission Bay Ferry Landing, because it's the only project in the program line and because it's expected to be underway in this first 5-year period, we kept their $4.5 million of programming and delayed their cash flow. Okay, and then the title of this slide is Out Year Programming Changes, and just want to define out year. That's beginning in fiscal year 29, is kind of what we think of when we say out years. So for paratransit, we were able to preserve programming at the $13 million a year plus an annual escalation through fiscal year 36 with modestly delayed cash flow. We know it's important to support this critical service and persons with disabilities and wanted to provide stability for this program. And again, this is the only the only operating program authorized in the expenditure plan. We also preserved Caltrain capital maintenance funding at $5 million a year through the next 5-year period before reducing the annual amount to $4.5 million through fiscal year 42. And just a reminder that our contribution offsets SFMTA's annual local capital match contribution to Caltrain, since SFMTA is a member of the Caltrain Joint Powers Agreement. For all other programs, we sought to bring them to a comparable level of funding as it relates to the share of revenues, which we'll get to in a moment. But first, let's talk about Muni Maintenance. Muni Maintenance, it's the largest program in the expenditure plan by orders of magnitude, as you all heard a little bit about last month. And as a result, it is driving a large part of the expenditures. So for context, it's over 2.5 times the next largest program in the expenditure plan, which is the Portal, and it's about 1/3 of the entire Prop L program. So in the final strategic plan, we incorporated the programming and cash flow in the 5 YPP amendment that was approved by the board yesterday. We reduced programming in fiscal years 29 through 40, specifically to ensure that we could stay within our 1.75 times maximum annual debt service constraint, which helps us to keep our credit rating high and debt costs lower. And Muni Maintenance was the logical program to adjust just because of its sheer size. And then we were able to increase programming beginning in fiscal year 41 and using some previously unprogrammed funds so that Muni Maintenance ultimately sees a $23 million increase in programming as compared to the baseline. And then for all other programs, we reduced out-year programming beginning in fiscal year 29 by 20% to fit within the revised revenue forecast. But for programs that advanced heavily in the first 5 years, we reduced them a little bit more. So because we were able to preserve this first 5-year period's programming, the programs that advanced early and advanced in this period needed to be reduced a little bit further in the later years to bring them to a comparable level as programs that did not advance in this 5-year period. Okay. We're getting towards the end, everyone, so thank you for bearing with me. In the final strategic plan, we did not make any substantial changes to debt assumptions from the baseline, but we did update our revolver loan facility capacity to reflect the new short-term debt instrument that we procured in October of last year. The final strategic plan remains financially constrained with assumptions like that 1.75 maximum annual debt service coverage ratio I mentioned a couple slides ago, which has allowed us to maintain our highest credit rating of AAA. So all that said, here's how it shakes out in the model. As you can see, assumed debt increases a little bit over the baseline figures, but stays in the same ballpark. And I do also want to note here that approval of the strategic plan is not approval of issuance of debt. If we reach the point where we see the need to issue debt, we return to the board for separate approval of any debt issuance. And if we don't and we end up financing less than the model assumes, that will be reflected in the next strategic plan update and those costs of return to project. So I know this was a ton of information. Again, thank you for sticking with me. I put this slide in here just to kind of recap the highlights and I think what the important takeaways are. So first, the strategic plan update process happens every 5 years. It's done in tandem with the 5 YPPs, and this is the end of the first Prop L strategic plan update. Second, we reduced revenues by 11% over the 30-year period to reflect the current economic picture. To fit within that updated revenue envelope, we reduced programming beginning in year 6, but we were able to preserve the important near-term programming that was adopted in the 5 YPPs. The assumed debt levels are similar to what was assumed in the baseline. And finally, we get to update this all again in fall of 2027. So with that, I just thank you so much for all of your attention, and I'm here along with our Deputy Director of Policy and Programming, Anna LaForte, to hopefully answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for the presentation. Member Levine.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question, going back to the Mission Bay Ferry Landing project. I'm wondering, are there any partnerships going on with UCSF and the Warriors and the Giants? And if not, why not?
Maria, do you know?
There are partnerships that are going on, both private partnerships that are going on. I'm expecting that in the coming months that the CAC will see a funding request as things are settling. They did, the port or WIDA received a large grant from the EPA, and that is going to be helping to fund the ferry landing and the terminal at Mission Bay. And so as things are settling with the federal grant and as the project is progressing, I'm expecting that a Prop L request will be coming to the CAC.
There is still an EPA? I'm joking.
Don't ask me.
So we'll have some numbers maybe about what the Warriors or other UCSF or others might be contributing to this
Yeah, let me, before the end of this meeting, I can look in the 5YPP and see what we put in, what we showed in the funding plan,
That'd be
then I
great.
can.
Thanks so much.
Member Ortega?
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I just have a few clarifying points to make sure I understood some of the slides correctly. Like really close for you, Maria. That's good. One of the things that we were talking about here is programming and cash flow changes, and I want to make sure I understand this. So what it is for these major capital projects where we are preserving the programming, the slide verbiage, but we're delaying the cash flow. Is it that we're punting out when we're giving the money, but we're keeping the total amount in the allocation?
Yeah, the cash flow is the reimbursement schedule, and it drives the financing. And so I think your understanding is correct. Okay. The programming amount is fully preserved, and they can request allocation of that full amount, but the schedule of reimbursement is delayed.
So in like industry terms, like one of the ways that I would phrase that is you're asking for longer net payment terms?
Unfortunately, I think I'm in a different industry, so I don't know if that's right.
I'm going to pretend it is because I haven't been proven otherwise. Net payment terms, I work in procurement and material planning, and one of the things that I do with all of my contractors and vendors is I ask for payment terms so that after some amount of time I am allowed to pay an invoice. So 30 days or 60 days is what I'm going to call like pretty standard. But in Europe, it's actually like 90 to 120 days. And so I'm assuming it's something of that nature where you're giving it like an invoice and you're just like, I'll pay this in a few years.
Yeah, that sounds right. So thanks. I'm learning new stuff too.
Well, if you ever want to learn more about procurement, I can tell you about it all day. I've been in meetings for days. Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that the way I have the definitions in my head are aligning with the definitions in your head. And so that's what we're doing is we're basically asking for a longer time to make the payments. Okay.
Member Ford.
And then the question that follows from there is, will that delay the project delivery or increase financing costs against the project, or both?
So if delaying cash flow will, preserving programming allows for an agency to come in for that full amount of a grant, and they can start spending it on the date that the board approves it. It's really a question of when we can reimburse. And we've worked with the project sponsors because sometimes there are other funds on projects that can be drawn down earlier. In this, we like to see things proportional or our money spent as late as possible. So it's really working with the project sponsors within a reasonable expectation of what makes sense. The Mission Bay Ferry Landing actually has very delayed cash flow, but we've had to work with them on what that means for the delivery of the project, because the expectation is if it says open for use on our public-facing information, that's the expectation of the public. They don't care when the port or whoever's getting reimbursed. So it's a public-facing schedule that would need to be met.
I may just add that generally we try to match the proportional reimbursement to the project schedule. We often find, though, that most of the time the sponsors bill us more slowly than in the schedule for a variety of reasons, right? The few times where we really pushed out the cash flow, it was more important to the sponsor that the total number be higher. And I believe that was like the case with the Mission Bay Ferry and like the portal.
Bars?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, similar question to my colleagues. So and I'm looking at slide 20, where it talks about programs that did not heavily advance in the first 5 years saw a 20% annual reduction beginning in FY 28-29. So, and then there's like a lot of bullets. Are we anticipating any significant scope decreases in
future projects because of this? Like, should we anticipate 20% fewer curb ramps? There is a reduction in programming. There are less funds that are available for projects because the revenues have decreased. But what happens over the next couple of years will inform what happens over the following 5-year prioritization program period. So, and so if the invoices are slower than anticipated, if we have less debt than we anticipate, if a lot in addition to revenues, behaving as they are right now, a lot of things can factor into how much less money will be available. So yes, at this point there is an anticipation that there will be fewer funds available among the categories, but we'll know better when we update the 5-year plans in fall of 2027 when we start with the baseline and we reestablish what has been happening over the next couple of years at that point.
Member Margarita, go for it. Thank you. Thank you again for the presentation. And so just to piggyback on my colleague's comment, how did you come to the outcome of deciding what programs weren't going to move forward as a possibility? Like, how did that decision get made? I'm looking at neighborhood transportation programs and equity priority transportation, et cetera, everything on the list. And so how did that decision get made as to what is possibly not going to advance?
That's a great question. And one of the ways that I like to think of it is that we didn't want to have favorite children among the programs. So all of the programs are taking a hit. The programs that advanced more in these first 5 years take a bigger hit starting in year 6. The programs that advanced less take a lesser hit starting in year 6, because over the life of the 30 years, all of the programs need to be claiming there's a similar share of the total amount of revenue available. So we tried to distribute the impacts in an organized way and relatively evenly.
I can add to that. Margarita, good questions. It's good training for the board. So the decision to advance or not advance funds in the first 5 years was established through the 5-year project list process. And then as part of this cleanup, what Amelia and Anna did was make sure that every program, with 1 or 2 exceptions, had the same proportion of the total funds available. So they're all given their fair proportional share bucket that was set by the voters, and they helped, really the sponsors helped decide, are we going to advance funds or not? And then we were just making the fair share as equal as possible across everyone.
Thank you for that explanation. And so as a hopeful person, when you come back and reestablish a report, et cetera, in the fall of 2027, if there's miraculous funding, then some of these programs might just get fully funded again, right? That's a goal, possibly?
Absolutely, and we are glad we have preserved the funding in the first 5 years. Yes, the hope is that when we come back, that revenues will be picking up and we can have more funds available for projects.
Thank you.
I was just curious, is the 5YPP and strategic plan baseline setting always about a 2-year process, or was it like particularly long this time around because it was the first Prop L one?
Yeah, that's right. It was the first Prop L, and we also had a carry forward from the prior measure. So there were things that needed to be taken into consideration as we're factoring how much money is available for the new expenditure plan programs, for the new expenditure plan rather. So it did take an unusually longer. We had, I want to say 5 or 6 new programs in Prop L that we did not have in Prop K. And, we just approved the the amendment to the Muni Maintenance Program at your last meeting. So, and most recently, the last 5YPP was approved in the fall, so.
Great. And then between the 5-year processes, is there like a regular check-in regularly occurring, or is it more like ad hoc adjustments are made if revenues majorly increase or decrease, or do we not revisit between the 5 years?
Just looking at our FAQs. I know we have it in there, so I could read something. We can update the strategic plan in between 5-year periods. It has traditionally followed the 5-year prioritization period programs. We have, when COVID hit San Francisco in 2021, we did do a strategic plan update to adjust revenues to make sure that we had enough money to be doing what we were doing, given what was happening with the economy. So we have the ability to amend the strategic plan in between the 5-year periods and to do comprehensive updates if warranted.
Okay, great, thank you. If there are no other questions or comments from members, is there any public comment in the room on this item? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
No remote public comment for item 6.
Great. Public comment on item 6 is closed. Can I get a motion and a second on item 6? And by Member Bars, seconded by Member Ng. I think we could take that same house, same call without objection. Great. Item 6 is approved. Thank you again for the presentation. Really appreciate it. That puts us on item 7, the BART financial outlook and regional transportation measure. This is an information item, and we have Pamela Herhold, Assistant General Manager, here with us to present this item.
Thank you very much, and I'll see if I can get the presentation up. There we go. Now my screen sharing. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. And I have about 12 or 13 slides, and I'll try to be quick because I'm sure we're all at the end of a work day. So first, most of you here know BART. Bear with me. I'm trying to advance this. Thank you. So as many of you know, BART is the transit backbone of the Bay Area. We connect with nearly every transit operator here across the region. We serve 5 counties. We have 50 stations and 5 lines of service. One important fact I think you all should know is that 90% of all transit transfers that happen across agencies, 90% of these transit transfers involve at least one leg on BART. And BART's largest market by far is San Francisco. Each day, 70% of our trips enter or exit in one of our San Francisco stations, and each week we have 3,500 trains traveling through the 8 San Francisco stations. So the pandemic has had a substantial impact on ridership and revenues. Pre-pandemic, we carried over 400,000 trips each weekday, and as you can see at the graph on the right, ridership is down substantially during the pandemic. The Bay Area has a unique concentration of employers. The Bay Area has a lot of finance, a lot of tech, and a lot of business employers, and so those are areas that are very adaptable to remote work, and that's where we've seen a significant amount of our ridership losses from those people that used to take BART into San Francisco 5 days a week. You can see on this line graph on the bottom of this slide here, the BART ridership is shown in blue, during the pandemic, and the return to office rates for downtown areas is shown in gray. See how closely that matches. That's what our as the downtown of San Francisco goes, that's how ridership goes. 3/4 of our riders have actually returned to BART since the start of the pandemic, but they're only riding 2 to 3 days a week, not 5 or 6 days a week. So this is a problem for BART. So pre-pandemic, we covered 2/3 of our operating costs through fare revenue and parking fees. And that it was seen as the gold standard of transit funding, a lot like our friends at Caltrain. Most of the service was covered by the users of the service. However, now that ridership has dropped, we are facing shortfalls of $350 to $400 million a year. And I think the chart on the right really illustrates this problem. The blue bars are our actual operating revenue, looking back historically, and also projecting out a few years. And you can see that steep drop-off with the pandemic. And the gray bars are what we forecast our revenues at before the pandemic. So we do annual forecasts, and before the pandemic, we had projected that our revenues would continue to slowly increase into the future. That difference between what we forecast and what we're actually obtaining from riders is about $400 million in fiscal year 24 alone. Now, we've closed a significant or a portion of that gap, but there's no way that we can close $400 million on our own. We are doing a number of things to improve our financial picture. We are, this slide right here shows in green the various ways that we're increasing revenues, and in blue the various ways that we're working on becoming more efficient or reducing our expenses. A couple of the things that we've done is, we've installed new fare gates. Right now we have new fare gates at 25 of our 50 stations, and we are seeing improvements in paid ridership and also improvements in what we call quality of life on the system. We have maintained our prudent inflation-based fare increase program throughout the pandemic, so small, regular fare increases. We're also seeking to diversify our revenue, including accelerating agreements to generate revenue, fiber optic revenue, along the right-of-way of the system. We are reducing our expenses. We have a hiring freeze. We've cut our non-labor. We cut some service agreements. But all of these together are really only going to help us balance our bottom line in the tens of millions of dollars. It's not going to solve the $400 million problem that we're facing. So despite our challenges, I think it's important to highlight that BART is an efficient system. We are one of the most cost-efficient rail operators in the nation, even despite operating in a high-cost region. So looking at this chart here on the right, you can see that BART is down towards the bottom in our cost per revenue vehicle hour. And I also want to point out that we've kept our cost per revenue vehicle hour growth at a rate less than inflation. And so many of you might be, thinking in your heads, well, why doesn't BART just reduce its service to balance its budget? We actually can't. And one of the reasons why is that despite the amount of service that we're providing, we still need to maintain and safeguard the tremendous number of physical assets in the system. If we were to shut a station down, we actually still need to have security there. We still need to cycle through the elevators and make sure that they periodically are started so that the engines don't freeze up or the motors freeze up. And so it's not quite so simple. And we've done this exercise a number of times throughout the pandemic, and we fully acknowledge that only about 40% of our annual operating costs actually scale with service levels. And here's another good example to give you. Back in the first full year of the pandemic, which started in 2020, we reduced our service levels by 40%. We closed at 9 p.m. and we ran trains every 30 minutes rather than every 15 minutes. And that only reduced our operating costs by about 12%. So if and that was about $120 million or so. So can you imagine what we'd have to do to service in order to save $300 or $400 million? That would really decimate our service. And then that makes me point out to you the graph on the right, which is what we call our death spiral. Less service, less riders, less revenue. We don't want to get into that. So we have a different approach. BART is leading with service, and we're focused on growing and retaining riders. And, many of you are familiar with BART. You know that we've had some challenges with cleanliness, with safety and security. And I'm really happy to say that I feel like we've finally turned the corner. We've revised our schedules to better match this new ridership demand, less peak commute, more evenings and weekends. And when we did this, we actually were able to save about $9 million a year, primarily on our power bills, on our electric power bills. So we're better aligning our service with demand, reducing costs there. We're also focused on safety and security. I mentioned the fare gates, but we also have a lot more uniformed presence out in the system. We have crisis intervention specialists, we have sworn police officers, we have ambassadors, we have fare inspectors, and we even have people like me. Every week, every Tuesday morning, I throw out a blue jacket with Millie. You saw Millie and a few other partners here. We haven't roped in Eileen yet. But we get out and we ride the system. We talk to riders and we report on issues that we see. And it's been highly effective. And we get, every Tuesday, we get a lot of thank yous. So our general manager likes the program a lot and he's going to expand it. So, and then we are also focusing on cleaning the system. And we have increased the number of scrub crews that get out, deep cleaning the stations. And we also have a really neat program called end-of-line car cleaners. And so when every train hits the end of the line, a couple of folks, two to four people hop on the cars, they give it a quick swab over, and they pick up any trash, and they send it on its way. So if you've been on BART lately, you've probably noticed cleaner stations and cleaner cars. The other thing that's helped with our customers is now we've retired all of our legacy cars and we're only running new cars in the system. And they just, they're new. And so they're cleaner, they're brighter, the lighting is better, and people really appreciate them. I also want to point out something very neat, which is our first phase of the rail car procurement was a $2.6 billion program, and we actually saved $400 million on that program through a number of factors, but primarily through really tight project management. So very excited to see that savings on that capital cost. The other thing that we're doing is really investing in fare coordination with the region. We co-lead the Clipper Bay Pass program with MTC. Bay Pass is an all-you-can-ride transit pass that we've rolled out at a couple of higher education institutions, including our friends in San Francisco at San Francisco State, and also some affordable housing developers. Ridership in this phase one of the pilot program, people using Clipper Bay Pass, the ridership grew 30% in the pilot. So anything that moves the needle, 30% in ridership, is astounding. Now we are selling Bay Pass to Bay Area employers, and we have about 10 employers signed up. This is I hate to call it revenue positive, but it is a revenue positive program for transit operators. This is not just BART. This is all 20 plus operators that are using Clipper. We're all participating in Bay Pass, and it's a really good program and, in my opinion, kind of the direction of the future. I just want to point out on this line graph slide right here that all these investments that we're making in improving the customer experience are paying off. We are seeing an increase in the customer satisfaction on BART. And then I want to move on to what we're doing to secure a stable funding source. So we are very grateful to Senators Wiener and Senator Arreguín for leading the regional transportation measure discussions. There was that press conference on Monday that I know was brought up earlier in the meeting for SB 63. We are very much in support of this, and on this slide right here, I've listed off a few of our priorities in any kind of revenue measure. First and foremost would be to sustain operations. We value the regional connection that BART has with our partners, so we really want to focus in on improving regional connections. We also are prioritizing equity communities and certainly prioritizing transit service over roadway investments. And if possible, we'd really love to increase and expand service because every time we change are able to increase our service, we see the ridership respond. Last, I also want to highlight that our board and our leadership team is very engaged in other efforts to fund transit, including participating in a number of committees and hearings at the state level and supporting the $2 billion ask for flexible funding for our state budget. So last, I think you all can agree that the Bay Area is better with BART. If there was no BART service, we would see a different Bay Area. There would be impacts to the economy, to congestion, to the amount of time that people spend in their vehicles or just simply aren't able to move around the Bay Area. We would see emissions increase. And just really, because I mentioned earlier on the first slide that, you know, BART is the backbone of the Bay Area with so many transit connections, we know that if we lose BART, if BART shuts down, it's really going to have a strong negative effect on other transit operators in the region. And also, a clean, safe, reliable, available public transit service is the ultimate in equity. And if BART was not running, there would be serious negative impacts to protected populations. So with that, I end my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Ortega.
Hi, thank you so much for this information. I had a question regarding the Bay Passes and offering them to corporations. One of the complaints that I've had about how Caltrain has offered their programs is it's an all-or-nothing buy-in program. I remember when I worked in the South Bay, I was trying to get my company to do a buy-in for Caltrain passes for the commuters that were taking Caltrain, and they told us very bluntly they wouldn't because they'd have to buy one for every employee on the site, which was just not financially feasible because of the small percentage of people. What they did offer us was a way to buy it through tax-exempt funds. What is your plan in offering the Bay Pass to companies? Is it an all-or-nothing buy-in, or is it a percentage? How are you offering that program to these bigger companies?
Very good question. So two responses for you. One is with BayPass, we are customizing the pricing for each specific company. So a company that, say, maybe is close to public transit but has a very low percentage of employees right now taking public transit, the pricing for them would be lower than a company in a similar location that had a higher percentage of riders taking public transit. So the team that markets and prices BayPass puts a lot of effort into working individually with each company to try to price the product at a rate that would make it attractive to the company and also reflect the true potential cost to transit agencies of the people that might take transit. So we're trying actually, this is the reason why I hesitate a little bit to say revenue positive, is because really our goal is to get the product in the hands of as many riders as possible and break even. So that is one approach that we're taking with BayPass. And if you have specific companies that you would like us to talk to, we're happy to send our team to talk to those companies. The other way that we want to approach riders on an individual basis is with an accumulator pass. So, and some agencies are already in the Bay Area, they already have this. And so if you were to ride a transit agency or transit agencies a certain number of times per day, week, or month, then all trips after that would be free. So we're not able to do that, at least BART is not able to do that right now under the current Clipper system, but it is something that we're looking at under the new Clipper system that is in the process of being rolled out. So two ways that I hope that we could improve on that in the future.
Okay, thank you. And then can I also confirm if this includes the ferry or not? I can't remember.
BayPass includes all transit operators, including WETA and Golden Gate.
Okay, because I know personally I have a lot of coworkers who really love taking the ferry. So it's like oh, well, if I could take something else too, that'd be fine. But they really want to take the ferry because they live in Alameda, and it's easier to take the ferry to San Francisco than it is to take BART. Okay. Yeah, and just to thank you for clarifying that the policy is still being worked on.
Member Levine.
Thank you very much for the presentation. On the federal side, the transit reauthorization, I don't know where we are in the 5-year cycle at this point, but I know a substantial chunk of funds are dedicated to some of the older rail systems like BART, Muni, and back east, many of the lines back there. Is that coming up for reauthorization soon? And if so, what are the prospects for transit reauthorization? It is coming up.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question. I just want to clarify, because it wasn't clear from your question. We actually don't receive any federal funds for operating, but we do receive, we have applied for and received a number of federal grants. And at this point in time, there are some grants that are, I would say, in the works that are being frozen as the current administration reviews their intended guidelines on these grants. So right now we are proceeding as quickly as we can with a number of grant opportunities where we have the guidance, and then others are on hold for the time being.
And how is it affecting, is this being factored in somehow into your revenue projections?
It's also new right now that we haven't actually revised or removed any of the potential grant funds. Well, our capital forecast generally include funds that we have already identified and have secured. And for those that are in flux, for lack of a better word, we have a category for identified but not yet secured. So we haven't removed anything from our funding outlook at this point in time, and I hope we don't get to that point.
Thank you.
Member Ford.
Hi, I had a couple of different questions that just struck me through your presentation. The first was that $400 million saved on the new BART train sounds like a lot of money, and I'm wondering whether that can be recaptured and reallocated, or does it go back into the mythical funding bucket that is so confusing to us on the CAC committee? The second question is what the impact of BART to Silicon Valley and the very high cost of those deep bore tunnels down in San Jose are going to have on our long-term funding outlook for BART as a system, also maintaining and managing that extension to the system. And finally, as that goes, I mean, like fundamentally the problem here is like the network design. And to what extent is BART pursuing capital grants to build infill stations in Oakland and infill stations to make this more of a not park and ride, not commuter, but like a genuine point-to-point transit for urban city dwellers? Sorry, pile of questions.
No, 3 great questions, actually, and I love the way you phrased the first question, because very astute, actually. So the $400 million that we saved, there were 3 main funding partners for the first phase of the railcar project. VTA actually contributed some funds because they are a partner agency with the service into Santa Clara County. MTC was a big partner in our funds, and BART funded a significant portion of that project. In the case of VTA and MTC, we credited the funds back to them. And in the case of BART, we actually had not yet put those funds into the railcar project. So that allowed us to avoid having to allocate funds from our operating program to the capital project, and which was particularly helpful during the first few years of the pandemic. So it kind of came in just at the nick of time, and we're very grateful that we didn't have to make those extra capital commitments from our operating program over into capital. The second one with the VTA, that is really under VTA's, the extension down into San Jose, that's really under VTA's purview. I can't speak to that. They are a contracting partner with BART, and they are covering all the capital and operating costs, both of the first phase of the extension open to Berryessa and for the further extension all the way through San Jose into Santa Clara. So, that's a regional question, but it's not one that I have an answer to. Can you remind me of your third question?
And then the last question was pursuing capital improvements to add infill stations on the existing core lines, particularly in Oakland. But, it's also a pretty long distance from, like, 24th and Millbrae. Like, there's infill opportunities, I think, in southern San Francisco. Make it more of a walking system.
No, I very much appreciate that question. Unfortunately, given our financial situation, knowing not only the capital cost of designing and constructing such a station, but also being eyes wide open on the operating and maintenance costs of an extension of an infill station, that isn't something that infill stations are not something that we can entertain right now.
that answer your question, Member Ford? Okay. I was wondering, I didn't actually realize that that 10% of the operating costs are for the BART police for this fiscal year or last fiscal year. Is that comparable to other similar transit agencies in the country? It just seems quite high, and I was also wondering, is that expected to decrease over time as with the new fare gates?
Very good questions as well. Our police budget, I think, is somewhere around $120 million a year, so it might even be a little bit more than 10%. I don't have any answers for you on comparability, but the many agencies contract out for police service or partner. If you're a city agency, like maybe you're entirely contained within one city, you might just rely on those city forces. BART operates through 5 counties, I think over 30 cities, a number of jurisdictions that are not cities, and so therefore the linear coverage that we need to provide with our police department is incredible. And so I hope to not see that as a percentage of our budget increase substantially over the coming years. But policing, not only do we have the challenges with the physical infrastructure that we need, or the physical area that we need to cover, but policing is also a hard area to recruit into. As you may know from San Francisco, it's challenging to recruit and retain police officers. So that we have to pay our officers in a manner that's accordable with the rest of the Bay Area. So it is a challenge for us. We recognize it's a tremendous cost, but at this point in time, it's one that I think is well needed.
And do you anticipate that there will be less need as the fare gates are rolled out to all the other stations?
I would hope so, that there would be less need, but we haven't actually spoken about how that might impact the police department staffing.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I was also just wondering, have you all considered making fares free for children older than 4 to help families use the system more affordably? I was wondering if you considered how many more people might use it and then offset the cost of that.
That's a good question. So right now, fares are free for children up through age 4, and then once they turn 5, they're eligible for a youth discount, which takes them all the way through the age of 18. So once you turn 19, then you're paying full fare. And I know that with the rollout of Clipper 2, we've tried to set up the system to be flexible enough to allow us to have different types of, starting out with maybe pilot programs to encourage more group travel, and so that would be one of the things that we would consider. But right now, we're kind of just focused on getting Clipper 2 rolled out, and then we'll tackle some of the innovative pilot programs that we could for our customers.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would definitely encourage you to explore that to grow ridership. Yeah. Just anecdotally, I hear from families that cost is a big concern, especially when crossing the bay. It's just very expensive 2 ways.
I agree with you, and I think that getting them while they're young and getting them on transit, getting them used to tapping and going through the fare gates is a really good thing to do.
Great, thank you so much. If there are no other questions or comments from members, we can take public comment in the room on this item.
Thank you, Edward Mason. I've observed at the Fremont Station and South Fremont and also the Millbrae Station, private commuter buses that will go into the parking lots there. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to market BART to these companies and obtain a revenue stream. I realize you're working with some companies to have a kind of a buy-in. I think there's a moral responsibility on behalf of the companies to actually buy in and just use those shuttle buses for a shuttle to the work site, not running them up and down the freeways as they do. So that would be my comment and potential recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
There's no remote public comment for item 7.
Great. Public comment for item 7 is closed, and this was an information item. Thank you so much for your presentation. That puts us on item 8. This is the Caltrain Financial Outlook and Regional Transportation Measure. Another information item. Jason Baker, Director of Government and Community Affairs for Caltrain, is here with us to present this item.
All right, I figured out the technology. Somebody else figured out the other part of the technology. Hi, I'm Jason Baker from Caltrain, Director of Government and Community Affairs. I know it's 7:30 and you guys have been here a long time. Thank you for your service. This is important work. I've spent time on an advisory commission too, and so I feel your pain for late night meetings. So you'll hear a lot of overlap in this presentation because for a good reason from Bart's presentation, because we also have high fixed costs and we have some similarities in our situation. Member Ortega, I want to try to address your comment in my presentation. If I forget, throw something at me and I will remember. So this is us. Caltrain has 77 miles of track from end to end. 51 miles are owned by Caltrain, and then the portion south of San Jose is UP, but we have rights on that and run trains on that. We have 31 stations, 3 counties, 20 cities, and about 2.9 million people, 37% of the 9-county Bay Area's population live in one of the 20 cities with at least one Caltrain stop. We are bidirectional, and we connect this corridor that you see there, and that's the land use context streaming right up through our Caltrain line. This is a little snapshot of pre-pandemic and today. Pre-pandemic, we were really running the railroad mostly on ticket sales. That's not normally how transit works, as you all know, but we were very fortunate to have one of the highest fare box recoveries in the nation. Then it dropped, and we lost about $60 million, or if you adjust it for inflation, about $70 million in just in fare box. And so it's really a sea change for us in terms of how we need to be able to operate our railroad, and really what we need is a new revenue model. We also lost direct member contributions. We have, as you know, 3 member agencies, and after the passage of Measure RR that was passed during the pandemic, we no longer received direct member contributions for our operating funds, and that was a loss of between $20 and $40 million a year. We, of course, do receive the funds from RR. We're very appreciative of that. Those funds come from the 1/8 of 1 cent sales tax, 3 county-wide. But that was a big change sort of in our operating situation as well. Before the pandemic, we didn't have an operating deficit. Once RR passed, we finally had, for the first time, our own source of operating funds, and we would have been okay, and frankly, with electrification, even better than okay, probably. But now we have a deficit of about $75 million a year on average for the 8 years, starting in fiscal year 27. And I'll show you a chart on that in the next one. One of the things, though, this has meant is that our model has changed a little bit. Before the pandemic, we were pretty much a commuter railroad, and because commute has changed and work from home has changed, the landscape here, we are able to move to become a more regional railroad. We have more all-day service, more weekend service, serve folks other than just those commuters, and that's, I don't know if it's silver lining, but it's been a good change for the railroad to go through for reasons that were not great. So here's a chart of our deficit. You can see that it varies year to year, but on average, it is at $75 million a year over starting from fiscal year 2027. And the numbers aren't as big as some of our other agencies, but in terms of a percentage of our operating budget, they're obviously still big and mean a lot to the railroad. So we're not just, sitting here, and BART had a lot to say and a lot of good things to say about their attempts to both on the ridership growth and cost containment side, and we want to talk about that from the Caltrain side as well. The first big piece, and maybe the most obvious piece, is electrification, and that has had significant positive effects on our ridership. We've got a little electrification segment later on because we couldn't resist, but we wanted to put it on this slide because as a reminder that is a big piece of our strategy. It's not the only piece, but it's a big piece of our strategy for ridership growth, and it's already showing considerable success, both in terms of ridership and in terms of polling and satisfaction. We also have fare programs. We got $1 youth one-way and $2 all-day pass for youth, and the theory behind that is to try to increase, like, get riders of tomorrow, but also they bring their parents on board, and parents are definitely paying customers. We also have the Pass Forward program, so when companies buy Go Pass for all of their employees and they don't use all of them, we give them an opportunity to donate them back to historically disadvantaged and low-income riders. And so those passes don't necessarily go to waste, but they are able to donate them and help us become a more equitable railroad and serve a broader, more diverse customer base. With the new trains and electrification come a lot of pieces on the customer experience side, and that's definitely, we hope, and we are seeing increasing ridership. We're getting a lot of good feedback on Wi-Fi. There's service frequency increase. We've doubled service on weekends, and that's really helped the ridership. We got personal alerts, bike lockers, event promotions. We had a Billie Eilish train. I don't know who Billie Eilish is, but I'm told we had a train, and it was very popular. We're trying to take advantage of those moments and really get people who might not always ride the train to know that, like, hey, there's a way to get here that's a lot easier than driving and parking. We, like BART, are working on the regional coordination piece, and we have some hope for that. And then we're also looking at everything we can to have non-fare box revenue, whether that comes from fiber cable leasing, using our own real estate. We don't have as much real estate as some of our sister agencies, but we're using what we can, advertising, anything we can to sort of try to generate things other than from the fare box. And then we're also looking at the cost containment side. Like BART, we have high fixed costs. If we run one train or 20 trains up that line, we're still paying to maintain the line. And in fact, we would, even if we ran no trains, we would have some obligations, including to UP, to maintain the line. So there's a lot we can't do in terms of cutting, similar to what BART talked about. But we are launching an internal cost reduction efficiency program. We've got a freeze on FTEs through fiscal year 33 and are delaying hiring some vacant positions. We are working on scheduling efficiencies, and we're working on, with the legislature and our partners at PG&E and our other energy partners, to receive credit for regenerative braking. Our trains, just like a Prius, return energy to the grid. It's a considerable amount of energy, and we are currently not getting any credit for that energy. And so we're working in terms of cost-saving measure to say, look, we should get some recovery for that energy that the trains return to the grid. So in terms of what would happen without funding, again, the highlight is that rail has high fixed costs. We've got to maintain these things. And so we're looking at different scenarios. We're looking at, maybe no weekend service or hourly service instead of half hour or 20-minute or 7 days a week, or even specific segment or corridor level shutdown, although that's difficult because we've got kind of one straight line, and you're, under any scenario, running trains up most or all of that line. What we know so far is that in most of the scenarios, cutting service doesn't save us a lot of costs, and because of lost ridership, because we are making money from our ridership as it comes back. But we are looking at those plans and sort of seeing what we can do with our best projections. The other piece of that is that we don't know how much ridership we would lose if we start cutting ridership significantly, both from those Go Pass customers and also just from everyday riders. We can project it, but at the end of the day, we don't know at what point there becomes that spiral that Pam talked about, where you think you're saving money by cutting service, but you're really losing riders and losing money, and then it keeps going down. So that it's if no funding comes, it will be a really serious situation for Caltrain. We have a lot of really difficult decisions to make on workforce and state of good repair, certain capital projects, all those sorts of things. We have been working with the region on the regional measure conversations, been really involved with those. Really thank Senator Wiener and Senator Arreguín and a lot of folks in the legislature and at MTC who spent a lot of time trying to find ways to not have the cuts we're talking about happen. And Pam's exactly right. Like, if BART has really serious cuts and problems, that's not only bad for them, it is bad for Caltrain, it is bad for Muni. Like, there is a symbiosis among the transit agencies in the Bay Area. So we really are thankful of all the efforts and time that folks are putting in to try to make that not happen. We are also told, just to kind of get a sense of if something doesn't happen, what Caltrain's plan B would be and where we're at right now. The good news from that poll was Caltrain has a really high favorability rating. It's 82% among likely voters. That's not just Caltrain riders, but it's just everybody we survey. That's the highest favorability rating of any major transit system in any of the counties we operate in. We're really proud of that. That wouldn't happen without electrification, and that wouldn't happen without SFCTA and all the partnership you all have offered over the years. So you should take some credit and be proud for the fact that people really like a railroad that a lot of help came from here for. Also, the good news is that 70% of the people we surveyed, over 70%, I think it was 74, agree that transit needs funding. So they like Caltrain, they like transit. Other transit agencies polled well as well, and they know that we need funding. They get it. 76% of the people surveyed said relieving traffic congestion on highways 101, 280, and El Camino, which are the ones that run parallel to Caltrain, is a priority. So they know there's a need. They know there's a money need. We polled very well in terms of a 1/8 of 1 cent sales tax. That would be like another RR for us. In San Francisco, 65%, 63% in San Mateo County, but Santa Clara County was lower, and so overall we're not at that 2/3 mark, and similar to the polling you saw from MTC. But we were proud and impressed to see the 65 and 63% in San Francisco and San Mateo. Obviously, this is a point in time. Things can change. Voter mood right now is not great for taxes. Really, the message is, we know you're important, and we know and we like you, but we don't really want to be taxed for you right now, at least not at the 2/3 level, although all the polling for any measure that we polled was well above 50%. And the one last takeaway I kind of want to leave you with is that favorability rating, we think, does mean that Caltrain will be an asset to any measure that happened, whether it's a regional measure or individual county measures or a Caltrain measure. We think 82%, and you'll see later in the slide deck, 91% of Caltrain riders surveyed, and this is a public poll, view Caltrain favorably. So here's the aforementioned electrification and ridership section, which we're also excited about. We've been around for a long time, the oldest continuously operating passenger railroad in the West, 160 years, starting with a steam train over there in the days of Lincoln, and then up to diesels, and now today those brand new, very, very nice electric trains. I rode one up today. My trip was 50 miles or so up the peninsula from San Jose. I'm not just a government relations professional. I'm a writer. So we launched late last year. Launched electric service in August. We had a first electric train ride. We had Speaker Emeritus Pelosi and Governor Newsom there, and a lot of dignitaries. We had about 16,000 RSVPs for those events, and we all volunteered there. People liked the trains. People really responded very well. We had events in every jurisdiction along the corridor, handed out a lot of squishy trains, and made a lot of people happy, and it was a really nice celebration. If you've ridden the trains, you know this, but I will go over this. There's faster service because the trains can start and stop faster, so we can run them close together. And if you've been on those local ones, and that's what I wrote up today, they hit all those stops very fast because they can start and stop faster. There's express from San Francisco to San Jose in under an hour, and quicker local service is 75 minutes instead of 100. Really, it comes down to you can ride more and wait less. We've got 20% more service, and again, a lot of that is just because of the trains. It's not because we're spending a lot more money on the service. We have 26% more train service at equity priority stations. Everywhere we have half-hour service during weekends and at all our stations generally, and off-peak, and then 15 to 20-minute service peak periods. And as you guys know, if you show up at if it's a 15-minute or 20-minute service peak, you're not waiting 20 minutes mostly. Mostly you're waiting 10 or less because you show up at some point during that. So it's really show up and go service at this point. Again, free Wi-Fi outlets, it's every surf at every seat, baby changing tables, and it's quieter inside and out. I did want to take a moment to focus a little bit more on that equity piece. The revised schedule does sort of inherently make our railroad more equitable than it was before when we were focusing just on those morning and evening commuters. We do participate in that Clipper Start program that we talked about, Pass Forward that I already talked about, that provides free passes for low and income and equity priority riders from that Go Pass piece. That's how we get those passes through donations. And the folks that we go through are 23 different community service organizations in the 3 counties who help us figure out who needs those passes and get those passes into the hands of the riders that need them. And then lastly, we do have 26% more service at equity priority stations with electrification compared to 20% at all. This is feedback about the trains in service. I think that one of our favorite ones is this post about we're still crying with happiness. Oh my goodness, it happened. We got to ride the new electric trains, and that really, 91% of riders, the people who are riding it, love it. Here's the ridership piece. So we've got almost a 50% increase in ridership since electrification. We expected increased growth, and increased growth, like pretty aggressive increased growth, is built into our deficit numbers. So we aren't likely to solve our deficit but through ridership alone anytime soon or through cutting. But we are very happy to see these numbers, and it's not only 50% increase over last year, we are about at 50% of our pre-pandemic numbers. So both those are very good signs, and that's kind of why we put them in the ridership piece. So to sum up, we support these efforts. We thank the legislators and the local elected officials who are working on these efforts. We are working with our partners. Our preference is either a regional measure or sets of individual county measures. But we are looking at Plan Bs just in case because we have to. And it's important for us that our 3 Joint Powers Board members participate. We can't have a situation where one participates maybe through a measure and the other ones don't contribute, because that is not what our JPA contemplates. And we are looking forward to serving the area for many years to come with nice new fast trains. That's pretty fast, right? Yeah, I grew up in New York.
That was great.
I didn't get the accent, but I got the speed. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Member Ortega.
Hello, yes, thank you for your presentation. I do believe you addressed the question, although I don't think it solved one of the concerns that I had with it, which is just that I'm worried that companies just won't buy in, even though you do have a really nice alternative, and I think that's a really good solution. I'm still worried about company buy-in, especially on the peninsula, especially when you hear a lot of the major tech companies are going through various cuts of X, Y, and Z. It's just, I think that's some feedback I would really consider, and I would definitely want to encourage the companies overall to really talk about how can we potentially split up these big programs to really encourage the companies on the peninsula to target this. The next question I had is actually about bike cars. My partner actually takes Caltrain every day, and he bikes. And one of the big things that comes up that he notices is 2 things. So the first is that bike cars seem to be overfilling, and so I actually don't know. How many bike cars run with Caltrain? 2, is it?
I think it is 1, but I'm trying to, it's 1. I know I should know this, but I try to avoid to try to let the bike people get onto it.
Well, I guess my question is, I'm curious if one of the things that you would also consider is adding an additional bike car into the system, because my partner has often described why, even though we technically live closer to the 22nd Street station, he will bike to 4th and King, because at the 22nd Street station, they're often turning people away because there are so many bikes. And one of the biggest problems that Caltrain has is the last mile problem, where you're not actually next to a lot of the companies. Like, you kind of need someplace to get to. Like, my partner has to bike to Foster City, so he's like another 2.5-mile ride. And while his company has a shuttle, it doesn't run except for every 40 minutes. So, like, he misses the shuttle because the shuttle doesn't wait for the train which I might add is another thing I would talk to companies about, is if they are running shuttle programs, if the shuttle isn't actually aware of the train and it leaves and then it leaves people stranded at the Caltrain, they're not going to want to take it. And that's not because of Caltrain, right? Like my partner's favorite part of his commute is the Caltrain part. And I can tell you that. And he hates the fact that if it's pouring rain, the shuttle isn't a really viable option for him. And it's not because of Caltrain, it's because of that last mile endeavor that is going on. And so I think that's like one of the other things I'd ask is first, looking at more bike cars to allow for more commuters with bikes to get on the train and really encouraging that aspect. And second, really working with especially the peninsula companies that use like the various shuttle programs. I know this is happening at the San Mateo or Caltrain station, on how to better improve that service too, and like fostering partnerships, because he's happy with the train, but he often describes serious problems where people aren't paying attention, they throw their bikes on his, he has to like stand down there, rearrange the bikes because unfortunately ignorance is a real thing, and they're like, oh, I'm going to Palo Alto, that's like before San Mateo, right? Happens every day. This is like an everyday thing, and I know he knows that one of the attendants is down there helping, but I think if there was like a second bike car, that could also help alleviate some of the pressure on like the first bike car and give people more space and make people more encouraged to ride. That is some of the feedback. I didn't really have a question.
And if I may, through the chair, I asked you to remind me at the end if I didn't get to it, and I didn't get to all of it, because the other piece on the GoPass is that we are relooking at our GoPass program right now and trying to make sure, so we're talking to those companies individually and together and trying to make sure that it fits their needs in terms of today's ridership and otherwise. So we are sort of trying to make sure that it still meets their needs, because that's important to us. Make sure that we don't let that fact that a lot has changed pass us by. Thank you very much for the feedback on the bike car, and I'm so glad that your partner is likes Caltrain despite the struggles. Some which, I wonder if there are ways we could get, because you can get real-time Caltrain arrival information, and maybe part of that is just education to the transit to the shuttle drivers of like, pick up your phone, this is how long it's going to take. Can you, that kind of thing. So I will definitely bring that back. I think the answer to the bike car question is that the trains are 7 and only 7 cars, and so and they are specifically configured for bikes. If I'm wrong about that, I will get back to you. But I think that's unfortunately just the way this is. But that doesn't mean we can't work for sort of better education about bike pieces and other better oversight.
I guess one of my other questions is, could you potentially run some of the trains so that there's 7 total, but 2 of them are bike cars, or is that just like not? You don't have physically enough cars.
They're all one piece.
Okay.
I believe that is true.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess that was my question: is could you just swap one of the cars out?
Yeah, I think we can't. If I'm wrong on that, I will tell you.
Vice Chair Daniels.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. I was looking at the presentation under the cost containment, and I noticed that there's a hiring freeze projected for the next 7 years. I was just wondering if Caltrain, did you do any layoffs with your workforce? Or are layoffs in the plan for cost containment?
We have not done any layoffs in the plan. The part of the reason that the hiring freeze goes out that far is because that's about how far we budget. And we right now, I mean, you can look at the slide and it says one of the things that we would have to do is have some serious concerns or some serious hard questions including about workforce. But right now, there's no specific plan to have any layoffs.
Member Ford.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. Another really interesting one. One of my takeaways from the polling is that it's a little shy of the 66% threshold, which means that funding mechanism would need to come through a citizen initiative, ballot initiative that only needs a 50% threshold. I know there's a lot of this like official working group to find a new funding, but that channel seems like it also kind of closes down the ability to have a citizen petition about revenue measure. And correct me if I've gotten this wrong, but this is feel like this is recent from the, was it Prop C here in the city? That was a citizen tax initiative, so it didn't have to be there 66%. So I guess I'm wondering, like, how are we connecting with the grassroots, so to speak, in order to sort of switch from being an official 66 threshold and down into that lower threshold?
I think that's, you're right. The Citizens Initiative is a 50% threshold, 50% plus one, and that plus one is important, obviously. And MTC is, proceeding with their, and Senator Wiener and Arreguín are proceeding with pretty much in a 50% plus one world, because that's where the polling was for a number of series of measures. I wouldn't say that Caltrain right now is looking at that for our own measure. If we had a backup measure, I think we would sort of think about that if and when we get there. At least in San Francisco and San Mateo, we were not. We were at 63 and 65, and when we went out for RR, we weren't at 2/3 polling. We about a year and a half before that, we were at 63, and then several months before, we were at 66, but not 66 and 2/3. We ended up at the ballot box at 60. So one thing that could happen is, and some of that's a decent campaign. One thing that could happen is voter mood changes enough that a campaign could bridge those extra 2-3 points. But MTC and the senators are definitely looking at that world, and it's it's going to take a lot of work to get the signatures to 9 county-wide. It was I think 250,000 signatures. And I don't recall the number for a 4 or 5 county number, but it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and frankly likely expense to get that many signatures for a measure.
Couple other just smaller comments. Yes, on the Billie Eilish train and doing more. I read a lot about the Atlanta system doing that for Taylor Swift and the way it can bring new riders in the system. And then on the bike cars, I have been taking Caltrain recently. The improved schedule is a huge benefit and really made it viable as an alternative for me in a way it wasn't before. But I also ride a heavy, large e-bike, and so the lack of level loading on the bike car is a significant noticeable factor, and also probably is contributing to the congestion, which is the increase in size of bikes as more people are riding an e-bike. I'm not the only e-bike on the car in the morning. So that, like, ongoing, the bike car experience. And then you mentioned this Union Pacific, the UP agreement for track right-of-way. Work in the freight industry. And the freight railroads have their own kind of quirks to it, and I guess I was wondering whether that was a renegotiable thing or if that was something that's set in stone for the next 200 years.
I mean, I think everything is renegotiable if there's enough money, but I think right now I don't see anything in terms of renegotiating. I mean, we certainly we would have liked to electrify south of Gilroy, and right now we just weren't able to do it. We've got pilot programs for a battery electric to go without overhead catenary because UP wasn't comfortable with that on their line. And there are reasons for that, obviously, because it's a lot harder to do a lot of things when you've got that many volts overhead.
They should electrify the freight. That's my non-topic. Yeah, they should absolutely join India in the market, world-leading electric freight trains. But
I did not know that.
With overhead catenary.
I think you said this explicitly, and I didn't quite catch it. But was the 1/8 cent sales tax that you pulled on hypothetically as like a backup sales tax? Okay, not like in addition to a regional measure.
No, I think that if there was a regional measure in the counties that we're in, or a regional measure in some, and contributions from other of our counties outside of a regional measure, for instance, San Mateo and Santa Clara both have expressed interest in re-upping their respective Measure A's. But if there was, then we wouldn't do a 1/8. It's really just we don't. This been working for a very long time on this regional measure effort with lots of bumps, and with deficit of this size and the significance to our budget, we at least had to sort of see. We pulled it for all 3 counties for 30 years for 1/8 of 1 cent sales tax, and almost I think exactly the same language as RR, just so we could kind of track.
That makes sense. And then what percentage of the deficit would that cover?
That would cover a little bit more than our operating deficit. Measure RR now brings in about $120 million, so it would cover our projected deficit, and projections are projections, and it would allow us to do maybe a little bit of capital on top of that. We pulled 2 parcel taxes in that same poll, 5 cents per square foot of built area and a 9 cent. And part of the reason we pulled the 9 cent was because the 5 cent was basically the same amount as the 1/8, about 120 million. But the 9 cent would bring in considerably more, and that would let us do more capital things that would help them. Those didn't pull at 2/3, pulled, I would say they pulled less than, the numbers were less than the 1/8 cent sales tax, although there is that margin of error that makes it a little bit dicey to say they absolutely pulled less. But they still pulled over 50%, both of those.
Okay, great, thank you. If there are no other questions or comments from members, we could take public comment in the room on this item.
Yes, thank you very much, Edward Mason. I look at the problem with our commuter buses that infiltrate San Francisco. One is a culture of convenience. In other words, somebody can leave their front door, walk to the street maybe, and get on a corporate bus and go south. Somehow we have to break that to where somebody would be willing to take a 20-minute ride from Noe Valley to the 22nd Street station and then board a train. I'm glad to hear that you're trying to work with those companies, but I think that they really need to have an understanding of the moral responsibility they have for climate change by running these buses, because right now buses are not full. They are, in my estimation, polluting the environment, except for maybe Google and Genentech. But the rest of the ones that I've observed, they're I mean, they're a 40-foot over the highway bus running empty. So somehow in your sales pitch, you need to talk about the culture of convenience, moral responsibility for the climate, and also to consider possibly a Muni Caltrain Go Pass to make it convenient, because otherwise you're not going to be able to capture that market because, the excuse is, I have to pay for Muni fare. Then I got to pay for the Caltrain fare. So somehow if you're able to get the company to get into a combined fare, that might be more appealable to the people that we're trying to change, because the attitude of the workers, from my observation, is I want convenience.
Thank you for your comment.
And that's what they go for. So to the detriment of everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
There's, caller, your 2 minutes begins now. Roland, go ahead. Your 2 minutes begins now, Roland.
Thank you for the unmute. It works a lot better. Okay, so first of all, hi to my friend Jason. Where am I going to start here? So the point about Caltrain being a great partner in any funding major is well taken. There's a good track record on this. As an example, Jason knows that the 26 Measure B would never have passed if we hadn't put $1 billion in Caltrain for that. But the reason right now why the polling in Santa Clara County is at 53% is because there is no viable Caltrain service south of San Jose, even though we have voted 3 tax measures for this so far, starting in measuring 2000, then already mentioned B in 2016, and more recently R in 2020. So in conclusion, on that point, solution is to restore the membership contributions, which were somehow terminated after Measure R passed. That was never the intention. On the bike cars, the solution is very simple, and I believe I wrote to the CAC last year. Caltrain is transition from 7-car to 4-car trains with front and rear cab, and then 1 bathroom car and 1 bike car in the middle. And during peak and special events, you couple them together, and then you end up with 4 cab cars, 2 bike cars, and 2 bathroom cars. And lastly, the point about India, it's great. Not only are these people the best people are transporting freight in the world, they are the only people who are capable of transporting double stack freight under electric wires. Thank you.
For your comment.
There is no further remote public comment.
Great, thank you. Public comment on this item is closed, and this was an information item, so thank you so much for the presentation and for being here. All right, that puts us on item 9. This is the state and federal legislation update. This is another information item. Martin Reyes, Principal Transportation Planner, is here with us to present this item.
Right. Good evening, CAC members. Martin Reyes. I was planning on going through the memo that you have in your packet and then ending with some comments on Senate Bill 63, which is the regional measure bill. Given the late hour, I wanted to give you an option. Would you like me to still go quickly through all the other bills, or would you like me to just skip straight ahead to SB 63, which I'm guessing there are some questions on? I'll leave it up to you, Chair and CAC members.
Members, would anyone like to hear about the other bills besides SB 63? Okay, sounds like we could skip to SB 63.
Okay, sounds great. So Senate Bill 63 was introduced earlier this year by Senators Wiener and Arreguín, and it was just amended last night. So this is hot off the press. You're the first body that we're actually briefing about this. It started as an intent bill, so there's more substantive language in print now. What the bill would do is, at its core, authorize a sales tax for what they're calling the Transportation Revenue Measure District. And by default, that district includes 3 counties: Alameda, Contra Costa, and San Francisco counties. San Mateo and Santa Clara counties are able to opt in. They need to decide whether they're opting in by July 31, 2025. A sales tax is authorized. The participating counties would have a tax rate of a half cent. Although in San Francisco, there is a variable rate option, so San Francisco's rate can go up to 1 full cent. The duration of the measure would be anywhere from 10 to 15 years. And this authorization also allows for a citizen initiative to move forward, in addition to MTC having the ability to put this on the ballot. The bill also designates MTC, the commission, as the governing body of the district. So the commission would be sort of making some of the decisions around what actually happens with the district. Revenues are designated to go to 4 major operators, which is AC Transit, BART, Caltrain, and SFMTA. There would be up to 10% of the revenues dedicated to transit transformation initiatives led by MTC, and smaller operators in the East Bay would also be eligible to receive some of this funding. The bill also calls for what they're calling a financial transparency financial efficiency review that would happen as soon as a measure is passed, which would happen in November 2026, if at all. And that financial efficiency review would apply to the 4 operators I mentioned. MTC would hire a third-party consultant to conduct the review, and they would explore cost-saving strategies that the operators would have a chance to respond to and then come back with their own plan sort of laying out what they would implement to achieve those cost savings. There are also some sections around regional network management. MTC would be allowed to condition the funds from the measure on regional network management provisions. There are also a couple of provisions in there related to San Francisco and San Mateo being allowed to introduce sales tax measures in increments other than a half cent or 1 cent. The current tax code that both San Mateo County Transportation Authority and San Francisco County Transportation Authority uses for our sales taxes only allow us to introduce either a half cent or a full cent. So this bill also includes flexibility for us to introduce a increment in a sales tax in increments of 1/8 cent. So there are a few other provisions. Those are the key ones. I do want to note that this bill is intended to just lay the foundation for what could be passed in November 2026. It is not intended to spell out every provision of the measure. Actually, a large part of this bill points to a new process, which is called the Transit Operations Financial and Responsibility Implementation Plan. It's a very long name. They're calling it TFRIP for short. Basically, what TFRIP does is the legislature is essentially asking the region to come up with a plan on how the regional measure dollars will be spent and how the region will actually help close some of the operating deficits that the transit operators are facing. That TFRIP plan is supposed to be developed by the operators and jurisdictions in the Bay Area by July 31. And then the idea is that the legislators would take the information from that TFRIP plan on how to spend the regional measure dollars and then incorporate it into an expenditure plan in the bill. And then that bill is what goes forward later this year to get passed, hopefully, and then signed by the governor. So with that, I think I hit the major points. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
So much. Member Kim.
Yeah, I'm just double check. So half percent means right now San Francisco sales tax 8.5, and it goes to 9.25.
Yes. So under a half cent, we would go above. Yeah, I don't know. We're forgetting what our exact tax rate is. Maria, do you remember what our tax rate is? I'm blanking. Yeah. So it would go a little bit above 9%. There is a variable rate option, so it could go higher. So 1 cent, up to 1 cent higher than our current tax rate.
That means 9.75 in case 1 full cent. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the explanation. Just a simple question. When in the legislative session, is there like a target for when, after the incorporation of the elements they're waiting for through the summer, that this would be expected to be authorized fully and signed?
The bill does have a few different things that need to be determined by July 31. So in addition to TFRIP, which lays out how regional measure dollars would be spent, allocated to the operators, the region also needs to decide on the duration, which could be anywhere from 10 to 15 years as allowed under the current bill language. And it would also need to decide on that variable rate. So it's a half cent in all participating counties. San Francisco would need to decide what its rate is if it's going to go higher than a half cent. Although the bill is sort of silent on exactly how these processes would roll out, so that's something that the region would have to figure out too. But it all needs to be figured out by July 31.
And then does the bill specify for a citizens initiative how long commission would have to qualify, or would it be bound by the current state guidelines?
So we anticipate that signature gathering wouldn't be able to begin until the bill becomes effective in January. And then I believe, based on what we saw last time, signature gathering can happen until May in order to make it to the November 2026 ballot.
Are there any other questions or comments from members? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Yes, there's one
Is
public
there any-
comment. Oh, yes. Roland,
Yep,
go
sure.
ahead. Go ahead, Roland. Would you like to speak?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I have to somehow unmute myself without getting an unmute. Anyway, so I'm just going to touch on the financial efficiency review because which right now is only being applied to the people who participate in the measure. And the point I made at MTC this morning is that this review should apply to all 5 counties, whether they decide to opt in or not. And I give you an example. That this would expose any county currently not meeting commitments, as an example, to Caltrain, including one agency which presently carries a massive operating surplus, which is being rerouted to capital projects which have been questioned by the state auditor, instead of, for instance, paying a fair wage to their bus and light rail operators. These are transit funds, transit operating funds being transferred to capital projects. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. There is no more public comment for, remote public comment for this item.
Thank you. Public comment on this item is closed, and this is an information item. So thank you so much for presenting. Really appreciate it. Great. Okay, that puts us on item 10, introduction of new business. Do any CAC members have any new business? There is no new business. Then we can move on to item 11, which is public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. Anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment?
Thank you, Edward Mason. I would propose to solve part of the fiscal dilemma that we're facing, an electricity utility tax and a surcharge on large commercial users and data centers, exempting residential users, and basically with the data centers focusing on AI and also the electric autonomous vehicles. These autonomous vehicles, if you go down to where they're stored, which they were in the past on 14th Street, but they've moved it someplace, even though they were stored, their little dome was constantly rotating in order to keep in touch with the main computer, I guess. So they're consuming electricity, even though they're in a frozen state. So I think, and also with the AI and large commercial users of electricity, they're going to create a strain on the electrical grid, and one in the generation, and also, and two, in the distribution. Munis having problems trying to get additional power from PG&E, and they're getting delayed. And these are the other stories I hear from major facilities that are wanting to get more electricity. They can't because PG&E says, well, you know, get in line. So I think we need, this is an opportunity to tax and generate revenue through a user electricity surcharge on large commercial users of electricity. You've got data centers down in Santa Clara County that are just taking up everything. So that's my recommendation for solving the problem.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any remote public comment? Yes.
Yes, we have one remote public comment. Roland, go ahead. Your 2 minutes.
And just unmuting myself. I just unmuted myself. This is really wonderful. I really appreciate it. The one thing I wanted to let everybody know is how much appreciative I am of your staff and having made it possible to save the transcript. Thank you so much and good night.
Thank you for your comment. There is no further public comment for the item 10.
Great. Thank you so much. Then public comment is closed, and that puts us on item 12, which is adjournment. Thank you all. This meeting is now adjourned.